Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring the world of Madelyn Moon. She's a somatic facilitator and expert in shapeshifting. We have this interview she did on Robert Edward Grant's think tank channel on YouTube. It is just jam-packed with really fascinating ideas about personal growth.
Shape shifting. That sounds kind of mystical. I'm interested to hear how this applies to everyday life.
Yeah, it definitely goes beyond the typical self-help stuff. It's not about literally transforming into something else, but
Yep.
about tapping into your personal power to change and evolve. Even Madelyn's name hints at this whole journey. Her full name is Madelyn Victoria Moon. And she talks about moving from her Pope essence, a very conservative upbringing, to embracing a more, spiritual and feminine path.
So it's like her name itself represents this whole shape shifting concept, moving from one identity to another.
Exactly. And she argues that we all have this capacity to shapeshift throughout life. We shed old identities and step into new ones.
Interesting. So how does she connect that to shape shifting in like a literal sense?
Well, she draws inspiration from ancient shamanic practices. She talks about shamans using shape-shifting to actually connect with and embody the essence of nature, like a shaman taking on the form of a fox to learn stealth and cunning.
Okay, I get that. But how does that apply to us today? We're not out in the wilderness hunting for food or anything.
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. She says that we all shape-shift in a way through major life events. Think about going through a divorce, changing careers, or becoming a parent. These experiences force us to adapt. We have to take on these new roles and identities.
I see what you mean. Those are definitely times when we have to shed old versions of ourselves and step into some new ones. But wouldn't it be better to consciously choose those changes rather than just letting life happen to us?
That's exactly her point. That's Madelyn's message. She uses somatic practices, things like improv, Osho techniques, and secret theater, to help people, particularly women, navigate these personal transformations with more awareness and more intention.
Could you explain some of those terms? Somatic practices, sacred theater. Some of our listeners might not be familiar with those.
Of course, somatic practices essentially involve connecting with your body and emotions to help unlock deeper understanding and change. You're going beyond just thinking about your feelings and actually feeling them physically. And sacred theater takes this a step further. It uses dramatic exercises and role-playing to explore different aspects of yourself, your relationships, your challenges.
Oh, so it's like using acting as a tool for personal growth, to look at things from different perspectives,
Yeah,
and to experiment with different ways of being.
exactly. Madelyn believes that by actually embodying these different energies and archetypes,
Mm.
we can break free from societal expectations and discover our true selves.
This makes me think about how much we try to fit ourselves into these little boxes. Like the good wife or the successful entrepreneur. It sounds like Madeline's approach is all about getting rid of those boxes.
Exactly. She specifically says that women shouldn't just strive to be the good goddess. She encourages embracing all of your emotions and expressing yourself authentically, not just the parts that society says are okay.
That's powerful. It makes me wonder, what shapes have you consciously chosen in your life? And what shapes have been forced on you that you've had to deal with?
That's a great question to think about. And Madelyn talks about another crucial part of shapeshifting, the power of witnessing.
Witnessing. What does she mean by that?
She believes that having a supportive group witness your transformation amplifies the experience, whether that's in a workshop or even with close friends. It's like having a mirror reflecting back the changes you're making. And that can be incredibly validating and empowering.
That makes sense. Being seen and acknowledged by others could make those transformations feel more real and lasting. It's like you're not going through these changes alone. We're sharing the journey with people who care about your growth.
Exactly. And it takes courage to be vulnerable and let others see all of you, the light and the dark. And speaking of the dark, Madelyn talks a lot about the shadow self, especially in relation to the feminine.
The shadow self. That can be kind of intimidating. What does she say about that?
She says that embracing the parts of ourselves that we usually try to hide, maybe it's our insecurities, anger, or jealousy, is actually crucial. It's crucial for true self-acceptance and love. It's not about denying or suppressing these shadow parts, but rather bringing them into the light and integrating them into who we are.
So it's like those shadow parts aren't the enemy. They're just aspects of ourselves that need to be acknowledged and understood. But how do you actually do that? It can feel overwhelming to even think about facing those darker parts of ourselves.
Well, that's where Madelyn's work gets really practical. She gives you a framework for exploring and integrating those shadow parts. Through the somatic practices and sacred theater techniques we talked about, it's about creating a safe space, either internally or within a supportive group, to bring those hidden aspects to the surface and work with them in a constructive way.
So you're not just sitting with your shadow self, you're actively engaging with it, exploring it, and ultimately integrating it into a more complete version of yourself.
Exactly. And this integration is essential for attracting healthy and fulfilling relationships. She actually wrote a book about this, Artist of Love. It focuses on using creative expression to enhance relationships and navigate challenges.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. How does she connect Artist of Love to the shadow work and shapeshifting?
She says that our unhealed wounds and shadow parts often show up in our relationships, and that creates conflicts and patterns of dysfunction. But instead of blaming our partners, Madeline says we should view these challenges as opportunities for growth and transformation. It's about using those creative tools, like sacred theater or journaling, to process our emotions and communicate better with our partners.
I can see how that would be much more empowering than just blaming each other. It's about taking responsibility for our own emotional baggage and using creativity to turn conflict into connection.
Exactly. And this leads us to another fascinating aspect of Madeline's work, her perspective on manifesting a king.
Hmm. I'm guessing she's not talking about attracting royalty in the literal sense.
You're right. It's more about embodying the energy of a kingmaker. It's about recognizing your own power and worth, and choosing a partner who inspires and moves you, someone who supports your growth and evolution.
So it's less about finding someone to complete you and more about choosing someone who complements your journey, who inspires you to become your best self.
You got it. And this brings us back to that idea of conscious shape-shifting. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally attracts a partner worthy of your love and respect. And that starts with understanding and embracing all aspects of yourself, the light and the shadow.
Like you can't attract a king if you're still hiding in the shadows yourself.
Exactly. And Madeline's approach gives you a roadmap for stepping into that kingmaker energy.
Yeah.
But before we go too much further, what's resonating with you so far about Madeline's ideas? What's standing out as particularly relevant to your own life and experiences?
I really connect with how she ties shape-shifting to those major life changes, like going through a divorce or
Yeah.
starting a new career. You're kind of forced to change. Madeline gives us tools to do that intentionally, instead of just feeling like fate's in control.
Yeah. It speaks to wanting to be in charge, that desire to shape our own lives rather than just reacting to what happens.
Exactly. And she uses this Lord of the Rings example to illustrate that whole manifesting a king thing. She talks about Arwen and Aragorn, how Arwen didn't try to change Aragorn, she just loved and accepted him, which helped him become king.
Right. True love doesn't try to force someone into a box. It sees their potential and helps them grow.
It's like that quote, you can't change someone, you can only love them until they change themselves.
Hmm.
I think that's what she's getting at. It's not about making someone into your perfect partner. It's about helping them be their best selves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And she's not just talking about romantic relationships. This manifesting a king idea can apply to all sorts of relationships,
Mm.
friendships, family, even work relationships. It's about setting standards for how you want to be treated and attracting people who meet those standards.
I like that. You don't have to settle for relationships that drain you. You can choose to be around people who inspire you and support your growth, people who challenge you to be your best self.
Exactly. And part of that is recognizing your own worth. Madeline talks about moving beyond transactional relationships, the ones where you're keeping score or trying to get something from the other person. It's about embracing a love that's more unconditional, a love that lets both people grow without demanding specific changes.
That sounds amazing, but it also sounds really hard to actually do.
Yeah.
We're so used to thinking love is about getting our needs met, about finding that perfect partner.
Yeah, like we've all been told this fairy tale about happily ever after. And it just sets us up for disappointment. Madeline challenges that and encourages us to create a more authentic and fulfilling kind of love.
I wonder what that would look like. To approach all our relationships with unconditional love, how would that change our interactions and our expectations?
That is a powerful question. I think Madeline would say it starts with understanding and accepting our own shadow sides.
Can you break that down for our listeners? What are some practical ways we can start to integrate those shadow parts into our lives and relationships?
Well, she gives us some really tangible tools. Remember sacred theater and those somatic practices? Those can be great ways to explore those darker, hidden parts of ourselves in a safe and constructive way.
Right. It's like using those tools to give those shadow parts a voice, to understand where they came from, and to figure out how to integrate them into a more whole and balanced you.
Exactly. And Madeline brings humor and lightness to this work, too. It's not all serious introspection. She encourages playfulness and creativity.
I like that. Personal growth doesn't have to be a slog. You can approach it with curiosity, with joy, even with a sense of humor, like giving yourself permission to experiment, to make mistakes, and to find what works for you.
Absolutely. And Madeline says it's important to find what works for you. She's not saying there's one right way to do this. It's about finding what resonates with you and what supports your personal journey.
That's so refreshing. Like she's saying, trust your gut, trust your body, and find what feels right for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to consciously choosing the shapes we take in life. It's about being aware of the patterns and beliefs that are shaping our experiences and making choices that match our deepest values and desires.
So what shapes are you consciously choosing to embody? What are some transformations you've gone through, and what did you learn from them?
That's a great question. I think one of the biggest changes I've made lately is learning to be vulnerable. For a long time, I tried to appear perfect, but it was exhausting and fake.
Yeah, I get that. Especially as women, we feel this pressure to be perfect, to have it all together. But you're saying that real strength comes from embracing our flaws, from letting people see the real us.
Exactly. It's been a journey learning to trust myself, to set boundaries, and to speak my truth,
Mm,
even when it's scary. And Madeline talks about this too. She talks about how important clear and honest communication is, especially in our close relationships.
right. It's about creating a safe space to express your needs and desires without fear of judgment or rejection. That kind of vulnerability is how you build strong connections.
Absolutely. And it's not just about saying what you need. It's also about really listening to your partner, to understand their perspective.
That's so important. We get so caught up in our own heads that we forget to really listen.
Exactly. Madeline talks about being more mindful when you communicate, being truly present with your partner, paying attention to what they say and how they act, and even their unspoken emotions.
Like that witnessing we talked about, but within your relationships.
Exactly. That kind of deep listening builds trust and intimacy. It's about being fully present, both physically and emotionally, to create a space for real connection.
And that ties back to Madeline's message about shapeshifting. It's not just about changing your outward circumstances. It's about changing how you think and feel, how you relate to yourself and others.
Exactly. And those internal changes can really impact your experiences, including your relationships.
Like if you want to change your life, you have to start by changing yourself.
You got it. And that self-transformation can be an amazing journey,
Yeah.
but it's not always easy.
True. And that's where Madeline's focus on self-compassion comes in. Being kind and patient with yourself, especially when things are tough.
Absolutely. She says to treat yourself with the same love and understanding as you would a good friend.
Like the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah,
You have to take care of yourself to be able to show up for others.
exactly. Madeline suggests some practical ways to cultivate self-compassion, like practicing gratitude, doing things you enjoy, and setting boundaries.
Those are all great ideas. It's easy to get caught up in the busyness of life and forget to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. And Madeline also talks about slowing down, making time for stillness and reflection.
That's so important. Our culture is all about being busy and productive. Madeline's reminding us to slow down and reconnect with ourselves.
Exactly. She says that real transformation happens in those quiet moments, when you just allow yourself to be, to listen to your inner wisdom, and to connect with the present moment.
You're making space for those subtle shifts to happen. That's where the real magic is.
Absolutely. And she encourages us to see those moments of stillness as opportunities for conscious shape-shifting, letting go of old layers, releasing limiting beliefs, and stepping into a more authentic and expansive you.
It's like you're choosing to evolve.
It really is. And it brings us back to that question we started with. What shapes are you consciously choosing to embody? What transformations are you ready for?
That's a powerful question to think about. And Madeline's work gives us a map for that journey, a map that includes intention, creativity, and self-love.
Absolutely. And speaking of self-love, Madeline also talks about honoring our bodies, like they're sacred. She encourages women to connect with their sensuality
Yeah.
and to embrace their bodies as sources of pleasure and power.
I love that. It's like she's reclaiming the feminine body from all the shame and objectification our culture throws at it.
Exactly. She wants women to have a loving and respectful relationship with their bodies, to see their bodies as strong and vibrant, and to express their sensuality authentically.
So how can we, as women, heal from that shame and see our bodies as sacred and powerful?
Madeline has lots of wisdom about that. She talks about using somatic practices to connect with our bodies and release any tension or trauma we're holding. She also encourages movement and dance as ways to celebrate our bodies and tap into that sensual energy.
It's like using our bodies to express ourselves and to heal, not just objects to be judged.
Exactly. And she also talks about using ritual and ceremony to honor the body and connect with the divine feminine inside us.
Can you give an example? What kind of rituals are we talking about?
She suggests a lot of things,
Yeah.
from simple things like a relaxing bath with candles and essential oils, to creating bigger ceremonies for important life transitions. The key is to find what feels right for you.
That's great. Like create your own sacred space, connect with your intuition, and find what feeds your soul.
Exactly. And that self-care is key for embodying that kingmaker energy, recognizing that you're worthy of love and care from yourself and from others.
Like, I'm going to treat myself like a queen, and I'm going to attract a king who will do the same.
You got it. That self-respect and self-love draws people in. It attracts people who have that same energy.
You're setting a standard for your relationships and not accepting anything less than you deserve.
Exactly. To meditate, to set intentions, and to connect with the energy of the king you're calling in.
Like you're sending a message to the universe, saying, this is what I'm ready for. This is the kind of love I deserve.
Absolutely. And even if you don't believe in the law of attraction or anything, I think it's powerful to take the time to figure out what you want and then create something physical that represents that.
I agree. You're taking an abstract desire and making it real, which can be really powerful.
Exactly. And it's not just about finding a partner, it's about creating the life you want, a life that's full of love, abundance, and joy.
It's like drawing a blueprint for your dream life and then taking steps to make it happen.
Exactly. And speaking of taking steps, Madelyn emphasizes that you can't just sit around and wait for your dreams to manifest. You have to take action. Step outside your comfort zone and create opportunities for growth.
Don't just wish for it, work for it.
Right. And she reminds us that transformation isn't always easy. There will be challenges, setbacks, and times when you doubt yourself.
True. And that's where self-compassion is so important. Being kind to yourself, especially when things are hard.
Absolutely. She says to treat yourself with the same kindness you would offer a friend.
Like you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself to be able to give to others.
Exactly. She suggests some practical ways to practice self-compassion, like gratitude, doing things you love, and setting boundaries.
Those are all so important, especially in today's world. It's easy to get caught up in everything and forget to take care of yourself.
Absolutely. And one of the things I really like about Madelyn's work is that she's not afraid to talk about spirituality.
Oh, yeah. How does she see spirituality fitting into all of this?
She sees it as an important part of the journey. But she doesn't say there's only one right way to be spiritual. She wants you to explore different traditions, find what resonates with you, and create your own spiritual practice.
Find what nourishes your soul, what connects you to something bigger.
Exactly. And she talks about the importance of listening to your intuition, that inner voice that guides you toward your potential.
It's like we all have this inner compass, but we forget to pay attention to it.
That's so true. And Madelyn says you can strengthen that connection with your intuition through things like meditation, journaling, and being in nature.
Those are great ideas. Especially nowadays, we're always being bombarded with information and distractions. It's easy to lose touch with that inner voice.
Absolutely. And another thing I appreciate about her approach is that she acknowledges the shadow side of spirituality.
Oh, that's important. What does she say about that? Because a lot of people think spirituality is all sunshine and rainbows.
Right. But she says there could be pitfalls on the spiritual path, that it's not always a straight line to enlightenment and happiness. She wants us to be discerning, to question our beliefs, and to be aware of spiritual bypassing.
Like, don't use spirituality to avoid your shadow side or to escape from the hard parts of life.
Exactly. It's about making spirituality part of your everyday life, using it as a source of strength as you go through the ups and downs.
But weaving it into your life, not keeping it separate.
You got it. And another thing I find so inspiring about Madelyn's work is that she sees the feminine as a force for good in the world.
Absolutely. What does she say about the feminine creating a better world?
She believes that the qualities of the feminine, things like compassion, empathy, intuition, and creativity, are essential for healing the planet and creating more just and equitable society. She wants women to step up, use their voices, and make a difference.
Like the world needs the feminine now more than ever.
Exactly. And you don't have to wait for permission to make a difference. You can start right now. In your community, your relationships, in your own heart.
Like that ripple effect. When we change ourselves, we change the world around us. And when women embrace their power and purpose, they create a wave of change that lifts up and empowers others.
I love that. It all circles back to conscious shape-shifting. Recognizing that we can choose the shapes we take in life, the roles we play, and the impact we have.
We become the heroes of our own stories, the creators of our own destinies.
Exactly, and that's so empowering, especially for women who have been told they're limited or powerless.
Madelin's giving us permission to break free from those beliefs and become everything we can be.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Okay, what is it?
If you could consciously shapeshift into any version of yourself, who would you be? What qualities would you have? What impact would you make on the world?
That's a great question. I think it's something we can all think about. So as you continue on your own journey, remember that you can create the life you want, find the love you deserve, and build the world you want to see.
Beautifully said. And just like Madelyn, you have the power to become the most amazing version of yourself. Until next time, keep diving deep.